Okay, we continue at pace. We're going to be joined shortly by Pradeep Narayan. Pradeep Narayan is the Professor of Participatory Research who will join us on Zoom from India. He is a lead of an organization called Praxis India and also Sadhana, which he will talk about, so I'm not going to. We wanted to... Oh, brilliant. Pradeep, hello. Good afternoon. We are there. We're good. We have sound. We have sound,
Hi.
maybe. We do. Great. Hi. So, normally what happens with Creative Brain Week is initially it feels like all kinds of confusion as your information moves all around. What I think you will start to see as Pradeep talks is how you can join the dots together in a different way. So I'm going to hand over and would like you to welcome Pradeep Narayan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And as I'm Pradeep, and I work with an institution here in India. It's called Praxis Institute for Participatory Practices, and I'm just going to share some of our experiences of reflections on systems from sense making. So this is something. The presentation which I collated based on a number of our experiences in the past and try to build it in such a way that it will be useful for this kind of meetings, workshop or something like that. Yeah. So next slide. For nearly 30 years, Praxis has embedded participatory methods across diverse settings, treating communities not as beneficiaries, but as co-producers of knowledge and change. And the aim is always been to create as much possible, the people-centered approach in all our work. Yeah, next slide. And over the years, especially even in the large-scale HIV program supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it helped institutionalize some kind of a community-led monitoring so that interventions measured are not only biological and behavioral outcomes, but also the strength of collective mobilization and structural shifts from reduced violence and stigma to improved access to rights and services. And most of our work in that sense is trying to measure some of the areas which are community mobilization where it is beyond certain binaries. Yeah, the next slide. Recently, in the work linked to the bonded labor and health within global initiatives, Praxis has also tried to embed monitoring through participatory census method or worker-led data or participatory theaters, digital storytelling, and various kinds of community mapping, ensuring that the measurement captures lived realities, debt, migration, occupation health, dignity, and rather than just putting it in some kind of an abstract indicators. Yeah, next slide. Building on this legacy, the initiative Sindhanai seeks to measure health from the gaze of the margins. It brings together diverse methodologies, participatory inquiry, narrative research, art-based approaches, alongside a network of practitioners and community organizations committed to epistemic justice. I'm grateful to be invited to participate in this event, and it has given me the opportunity to pause and reflect on our various participatory practices we engaged in at Praxis, which is an organization rooted in Global South and which has trained more than around 2,000 participatory practitioners through its flagship program, which is also called The Workshop, the Participatory Commune, which is held every year for almost like 26 years now. Yeah, the next slide. I will begin this talk with an experience. 6 years ago, a UN agency approached us with a request to facilitate a participatory workshop with persons with disabilities to understand their expectation from the water and sanitation ecosystem. My colleagues, Anusha, and I agreed without hesitation. And participatory workshops were something we had done many times before. But when we began designing the pedagogy, we felt a quite discomfort. A participatory workshop is not a training where experts share knowledge. It's a space where the knowledge already present in the room meets, speaks, and grows. And for this to happen, participants must be able to communicate with one another. Yeah, next slide. Now, in this particular workshop, this assumption was a bit shaky. Some participants could not hear, some could not speak, some could not see, and some had little limited mobility. The tools we usually rely on, even the participatory tools, that is either speech, writing, visual cues, or movements, they are not able to become the bridge among the participants. There was no single medium that worked for everyone. Then we realized that touch was the only form of communication accessible to all. So the participants introduced themselves to one another through touch, and the gesture was simple, but it carried very deep meaning. In that moment, we were reminded of something we often forget, that the knowledge does not always begin with language, it often begins in the body, in presence, in just recognition, in the acknowledgement that I know you are here. And touch was not a workaround, it is a kind of a higher order form of knowing. But introduction is only the first step in participation. The deeper challenge was enabling the discussion, which could connect such different sensory worlds. Yeah, the next slide. Yeah, again, the next slide. The answer emerged with emotional clarity, the shared lived experience of deprivation and discrimination, not sameness, but relational understanding. If touch built the first bridge, solidarity became the second. So those who could speak were invited to imagine the deprivation of hearing in the context of sanitation, and those who could see were asked to imagine darkness. Those who moved freely were encouraged to think about physical barriers. Slowly, the lived experience began to engage with one another across difference. So, ability was no longer the invisible center of the room. We stepped back, and the participants started became the makers of the meaning. Looking back now, we need to acknowledge there is something both unsettling and hopeful. Participation is often designed for those who need the least adjustment. We speak easily about inclusion, yet our methods frequently assume uniform bodies and shared channels of expression. The moment we assume a common medium, we risk excluding others by design. And that experience also taught me that solidarity is not just a sentiment, it is actually an infrastructure for participatory approaches. And without it, the participation collapses into some kind of a condescension, however well intentioned it was. And next slide, when languages failed, bodies spoke, and when methods collapsed, the solidarity held. Next slide. I encountered this lesson again in a very different context through some other participatory practice, a tool which we often use, which is called as transact walk. Among the many transact walks I have undertaken, one remains very particularly vivid. I did it with my colleague Ponuchami, who is also a leader of a sanitation workers community action group in Tamil Nadu. Yeah, the next slide. What is transact walk? Transact walk asks us to move across a settlement rather than remain in the safety of the meeting rooms. They draw us away from the main road and that visible pathway where infrastructure gathers and privileges often reside. And we are encouraged to move into much thinner lanes and with very difficult geographies, and where the systems are not so easily usable. So as we walk, we go beyond voices and text. We are trained to observe. And we notice houses, we notice drainage, we notice water sources, we notice places of worship, burial grounds, and the various rhythms of the street life. And we begin to see inequalities that we may have never formally articulated but are unmistakably present. It is often here that we encounter the communities engaged in sanitation work. the communities whose labor sustains the health of the settlement, yet whose own living condition reflect the long history of marginalization. Yeah, next slide. But what we rarely speak about, and what I learned to attend to over time, is that during a transact walk, we do not only see, we also smell. The smell of food drifting from certain homes, the stench of stagnant water, or some sharp chemicals, or the heaviness of untreated waste. So the smell here in this scenario is not incidental. It often carries the imprint of occupation, the work which is done. And through occupation in India of caste and also class and historically structured hierarchies of labor. So some communities live with orders, others are structurally protected from inequality. In this sense, inequality in this sense is not only visible, it is also inhaled. Yeah, the next slide. What is perhaps even more troubling is that smell over time becomes attached to the identity of a community, even when the habitation itself may not smell, does not smell. Yeah, the next slide. As Ponuchami once observed, the dominant caste groups sometimes refer to a settlement as that kind of a stinking hamlet, even when there is no such odor. The imagination is shaped by their personal encounters, seeing a sanitation worker during garbage collection or their body carrying the smell of the waste they handle. The stigma then moves from the occupation of the person and from the person to the entire community and also to the geography where they reside. Right? Yeah, next slide. So, yet the fault lies neither with the individual nor with the community. It lies in the occupation and perhaps even more with those who generate waste but remain insulated from its consequences. What we have realized is no survey captures this well, no indicator adequately records it. Yet the body knows and feels a feeling of stigmatization. And when the body knows, that sense making has already begun, whether or not the system is ready to acknowledge it. Yeah, the next slide. So, if there is one way to understand participatory methods and approaches, it is that participatory approaches are not merely methods, they are bridges, the bridges between bodies and systems, bridges between lived experience and institutional response, bridges between what is sensed and what is eventually structured. Those senses are eventually structured into policy, design, and action. So, if participatory methods are not doing this function, I would say they are not participatory. So, for too long, systems have stood at a distance from the lives they seek to organize. Yeah, next slide. They have relied on categories rather than encounters, on summaries. Participatory approach practices disrupts this distance. It asks institutions to step down from their vantage point and walk, sometimes literally, into the terrain where the life is being lived. When we undertake a transact walk, as we saw, the system also walks with it. So when touch becomes a medium of dialogue, the system actually learns a new language. So participation at its deepest is not about inviting people into a pre-designed rooms. It is about redesigning the room itself. Because the problem has never been that the people lack knowledge. The problem is that the systems have not known how to receive it, through many senses. And participatory approaches makes this reception possible. They slow systems down, they make them attentive and expose them to discomfort. In doing so, participatory methods tend to restore something institutions often lose, and that is the capacity to sense. That is why I think the participation in our work must not be reduced to a toolkit or a procedural requirement. It's not a checkbox. It's not a meeting. It's not a focus group discussion. It needs to be seen as a kind of an epistemic shift, a reorientation of how knowledge is recognized, validated, and acted upon. And when we do this with integrity, I think the participatory practice allows bodies to remain thinking bodies as not objects of studies, not beneficiaries, not data points, but co-creators of understanding. And bodies do what we use the term called sindhanai, bodies do synthesize. Synthesize is a Tamil word which means a critical reflection. And something happens at that moment, like systems begin not just to function better, but to start seeing things differently. They begin to notice the thin lines, to register smell, not only statistics. It tries to hear the silence and not only the speech. In other ways, the participatory approach do not merely connect bodies and system. I think they humanize the system and they redistribute power, and they require institutions to loosen their grip on certainty and expertise. And they demand humility, the humility to accept that valuable knowledge may lie outside the formal structures. So what we realize that if we are serious about thinking better together, we have little choice. The future has to be shaped by the system that listen and feel the deepest and that dialogue. So perhaps the task before us is not simply to design stronger bridges between the bodies and system, but to ensure that over time the bridges become unnecessary. Sensing and system, experience and structure, people and institutions should not be distant from one another. And that is where the ambition of being participatory has to succeed, not when voices are included, but when dialogues between people, between the systems become more structural. I think I will stop here for more questions. But idea here is this is a thank you for this opportunity to give us to reflect on this particular participatory method approaches from this this theme, I would say, and it helped us rethink about our own approaches, how bad we are, how bad we were, how good we could be. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
So we have about 10, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, where we can invite some questions, and I'll filter between Pradeep online and the people in the room. We do have people with mics, I think, somewhere out there in the gloom. I have to do this because otherwise I can't see you. I'm blinded by the light. It wouldn't be nice to be deafened by the silence in a non-judgment way. You have a question in the back? Yeah, please.
Yes. Thank you very much for the talk. One question about the framework is, how does the framework fight against apathy, for example? So when you bring people to the room, but there is no intent to participate, how do you deal with that or fight against it?
I think this happens quite a lot in our participatory workshop where we see this that thing is, and often we tend to create a very I would say a short circuiting or short easy solution, which is to homogenize the people who are present in the thing. So we'll have separate workshop for women, separate for men, separate for upper caste or lower caste, so-called upper and lower caste. So we tend to make that as a thing. But ideally, it is what is important, we have realized, is to face the tension quite often in the rooms, and often the objective of our workshop is not to train the participant, but to help create a space in the knowledge. And in most cases, we use like something visual tools where we tend to we record everything on the ground. We try to democratize the space of knowledge sharing, and most of the things are written in the small cards. Every opinion gets written in the cards, and in that way, the opinions are on your face, and you can see that, and you can challenge that. And often when you see those opinions lying on the floor, it will be very difficult for you not to challenge it. But then, having said that, it is also a power dynamics which will operate. Some people will say, I don't want to engage in this space. I would choose a better battle to fight. Or I would rather, silence is also a power. Some men would not like to speak in a women's group because they don't want their voices to be countered. So they will prefer to be silent, right? So the power operates in multiple ways. But what we realized is the methods and approaches which you see, at least it takes to a level to make them critically think about their thing, and the outcome of this process may not be seen in that space, but would be seen at a later stage in a different way. And that's the way of ethically dealing with it, because we don't want to create a space where we want everybody to speak and then create a space which is not really not harmful for them. So therefore, all these things plays well. And idea here is, as a facilitator, are we able to understand this silence, understand the various power dynamics, and our outcome indicator should not be a very well documented output which talks about everything rather than a process. Yeah.
We have time for a few more. Anybody out there in the darkness? Out there in the light, because I literally can't see anybody. I have to do that again. Someone down the front. Pradeep's idea of sitting with the problem,
Hi.
not running away from it, making it possible, echoes
Hi.
so much from yesterday. Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth is my name. I work for GBHI. And my question is, I've seen some of the publications of your praxis. Where can we get these publications? I've tried to look for them and I wasn't able to. Particularly, I was interested in from beneficiaries to actors of change, which is something that GBHI is working towards.
Absolutely. I can share you the link of our, it's in our website, www.praxisindia.org. And there is a LinkedIn page also where you can get it. I can share with Dominic and can be shared with everyone. And there is a LinkedIn page called Sindhanai, 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 where you can actually get even more of the recent documentation. Yeah.
And if you go to the creativebrainweek.com website and sign up there, you'll get a newsletter which we can send things out to. Given GDPR, we can't just send you fun stuff. Is there another question up the back? Great. Okay. Feels like we have reached a natural conclusion. So, before I say goodbye to Pradeep, I have two more comments. This afternoon, we sort of change mode. We will still be giving presentations like this, so we don't entirely change mode. We're not going to do a Transept walk today. But we wanted to give you some case studies, some work in process, some action-driven activity. So please join us for those. They're about 20 minutes each and come and go as you need. For the rest of the week, we change mode entirely. So tomorrow, we start and play around with music. On Thursday, we start and play around with the body. On Friday, we really examine this idea of radical hospitality and what that might mean. And we do that in the Irish Museum of Modern Art, a cultural space, but also a third space, a space apart. We have our own two spaces apart. We have an exhibition that wraps around this building. Please take time to go and look at it. It includes the extraordinary film from Asbestos and Roscoline that won the Pratchett Prize yesterday. Was awarded the Pratchett Prize, not competition. And there is also the exhibition Meon in Unit 18. If you are curious about where that is, please go and talk to a person with a blue t-shirt. Pradeep, firstly, thank you so much for joining us. It is continually extraordinary to listen to you and to be able to hear you in the same 2 hours as Shane O'Mara, as Louise Foote, as Mani Ramaswamy and Paul Dockery and Harriet Tyndall, has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to the audience for their time. Thank you.